And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. That's right. I said welcome back because I know you were just listening to our stuff and you wanted more. So you came back for more. Folks, wise decision because we have a lot more for you. We've got a great guest today talking about some really cool stuff, very cutting edge. I think you're going to love every minute of it. Um, this is the podcast that is about podcasters. It's for podcasters. It's done by podcasters. This is the place where we all come together to lift each other up. Folks, this is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So let's get sailing. Let's introduce our guest, the host of the Trending Communicator podcast, co-author and co-editor of the book, The Most Amazing Marketing Book Ever, and the Chief Curiosity Officer of Inquisitive Communications, his company. Can't wait to hear about this either. Please welcome Dan Nestle to our program. Dan, how you doing today?
Rory, it is good to be here, and I'm so glad to be, speaking to you, but also speaking to podcasters. I mean, how often do you? I think now we're big enough that we're actually a subculture, like we're actually a thing. We're a segment. We've become a segment. I think that's such a grand achievement.
I agree.
And yeah, and it's exciting to be kind of among this tribe or be part of this tribe.
Thank you. Appreciate that very
Yeah,
much. And I could not agree with you more. I think that we've even grown beyond being called a community at this point because community just
yeah,
seems so small. It's more of a movement. Yeah, like you said, segment. I like that. I like that. That's a marketing word, right?
it is. Yeah, it
Okay.
is.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you tell everybody about that as we go.
Sure.
Dan, tell everybody, who is Dan Nestle? What are you about? What brings you here today, brother?
Like the hardest question to answer is who are you and what have you done and all this. So like I'll try to keep it in the lane, so to speak, but feel free to interrupt me if I go in a particular direction.
Got it.
Um, okay, well, I am so Dan Nessel, and I've had a career of about, I don't know, 2.5 or almost 3 decades in marketing and communications, and have been all over the world. I grew up in New Jersey, and after I left college and out of Philadelphia, I went straight to Japan, and then I went there to teach for a year. And 16 years later, I ended up leaving. I had a pretty interesting, almost like college situation where, I'm still trying to find myself, and ended up really loving Japan, getting into not just the culture, but just making a lot of friends and kind of these multiple communities I started to belong to. I ended up working in like teaching and then in recruiting. I was a recruiter for a little while before I think, I finally got like a real job at PwC. So I had a marquee brand. I was real set. I just getting married and then 9/11 happened. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but so we're back in 2001 for some of you younger listeners. 9/11 happened, and through everything kind of up in the air for my job, which was really focused on international projects for this global company. I was like, assigning project managers to things. When that all dried up, I read this book, became kind of seminal book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I'm sure many of you have read it, and it's kind of silly when you think about it, but I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and I was like, that's it, no more corporate, I'm leaving. And I'm like, what can I do? The only thing I really know how to do, apart from speaking some Japanese, is write. So I got some business cards printed, um, said I was a copywriter, sounded good. I knew I could write. I'd never done 1 inch or ounce of copywriting like professionally up to that point. And here I am, like 30. But I got business cards printed and I went to some networking parties, and lo and behold, I'm a copywriter. And people believed me. I got a couple clients real fast. And it turns out that I was lucky. I was good at it. Made some great connections. And I didn't know it at the time, but that put me on solidly on the career path that I ended up on, which is in marketing and communications. So I had my own business for like 3 4 years, ended up working for one of my biggest clients full time as a marketing and PR manager. So, my couple of years of eking out headlines and writing about transistors and then semiconductors and then this crazy thing called the internet, which was just budding really at the time, got me into some really good marketing kind of juju, and I ended up working with Robert Half, big company. Um, and I stayed there for a little while. They sent me to Australia for a year. So I left Japan and went to Australia for a year. Uh, didn't love Australia, and we can go into that in a bit if you'd like. But Australia as a place, amazing. My wife and kids, great time. My kids were little at the time, 3 and 5. Um, but as a place to work, it was a nightmare for me. So I after about a year, I split, came home, tail between my legs, got a degree in marketing, and then just got a couple of jobs, and then I ended up working. Fortunately, I just went from, my career started to really take off as a communicator. And then I ended up with a Japanese company, big one called Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, where I was running the Americas communications and marketing team. And then same thing I switched over to a company called Lixel, which is a another big Japanese company, but you'd know them from you've sat on the products, American Standard, uh, or if you've used the products, GOOOOO as another plumbing brand. So it's really fascinating times doing communications and thought leadership for those companies and executive positioning. Um, so professionally, that's where it ended up, and I ended up leaving Lixel a year ago, almost about a year ago, as the time of this recording, and then started my own business, Inquisitive Communications, because look, I mean, been in the comms world for long enough. I knew all the people. I got a couple of awards. I kind of understood technology, so I figured with AI, the timing was right, and I went back to the entrepreneurial side. Um, that's like professionally, but almost the whole time, I'm thinking, I was a serial procrastinator and also always sort of never really felt satisfied with the direction of my job or my work, and it just weighed on me. And I knew I needed some creative outlets. I knew I tried to find different hobbies, but ultimately I just knew I had to do something creative. So just around before the pandemic, I just got a microphone and hemmed and hawed for a while until somebody told me, you like to talk to people, you got some interesting things to say. What are you waiting for? I said, well, I don't have a show. I don't have a brand. I don't have a name. They're like, you have your own name. Start a show. What's keeping you? So fine. I started the Dan Nestle show back in, whatever it's 2020 or 2019, 2020, I guess it was. I think it was 2020. And yeah, and and I've been going ever since. And, I rebranded to the Trending Communicator last year because I decided to focus in on my personal brand and on the comms world, which is where my business and where my clients and the people I know primarily are. Um, and turned out to be a wonderful decision. But, it's been one consecutive show essentially for almost 5 years now, I guess. And yeah, so that's it. On the personal side, I'm married. I have a Japanese wife. I speak Japanese, although I don't speak Japanese to her. It's too embarrassing. Her English is amazing. But my wife, I have two daughters who are, 18 and 21 now. So, you know, um, that accounts for a lot of the gray hairs you're seeing now. And one of them is actually in college in Japan, and the other one is still here with us, studying to be a doing cosmetology and doing nails and hair and stuff, and she's loving it. It's really nice to see them grow, and they're always very, somewhat backhandedly supportive of the podcasting. Oh, Dad, you're recording again. Oh, that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, and so I mean that's like the kind of big long tail. I mean, a lot has happened since in between, but it gives you a big picture. I've always been a technophile, if not a technologist. I've always liked technology. I've always thought that, especially in marketing and communications, that technology is the solution to, or the solution to most of the roadblocks we face as a marketer, as a communicator, can be found in technology. It's not exactly true, but I've always felt that way. looking for easier ways to do things, faster ways, more efficient ways. It's part of my whole thing. I can't sit still and never satisfied with anything, right? Um, and I ended up really leaning into the kind of marriage between technology and communications. Um, very concerned about the future of the profession and how we interact with technology. And then when AI came around, I mean, it is, I think it's an indescribable change. It is a Gutenberg printing press slash, in like cotton gin, whatever, like any of these massive inventions, roll them all up into one. And I think we're approximating the impact of AI on our techno-industrial society. So I want to be in it, be at the lead of it. And I talk about it a lot. So
Nice.
um, yeah, I tend to meander a little bit. I do have ADHD. It's another thing.
Okay.
I mean, I was diagnosed a few years ago. Greatest thing ever happened. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about any or all of the above. Um, where do you want to go, Rory?
I love it.
I'm in your hands.
I love it. It's always a difficult question when you say, "Hey, what are you about? Who are you?"
Yeah.
Because I mean, how do you even answer that question, right? You just start
Yeah. I mean,
and keep on going, brother.
I think a lot of people I living in Japan, right? For so long, and I kind of feel like I'm bridging the cultures in a lot of ways. And I went there at such a formative time when I was only 21, and a lot of my socialization growing up and sort of becoming an adult was there. So I have these weird, well, from an American perspective, I suppose, like I tend to be a little deferential. I tend to think hierarchically sometimes, or I have different ways of thinking about things. And now that I've been back here for so long, I'm a mixed up, muddled up mess sometimes. But I tend to like feel like that time in Japan really, um, kind of changed my outlook a lot on I guess like what's worth worrying about and what's not worth worrying about in some ways.
Hmm.
And but what I was going to say is in Japan they tell you most times when you meet people they identify with their company, right? They say so if you say, "Hey, so who are you?" It's like I'm such and such. I'm assistant general manager at this and this company. I've been there for 15 years. Nice to meet you. Like that's
Right.
enough, right?
Yeah.
Um, whereas like here you tend to give a little more context. And I could have started by saying, yeah, I run Inquisitive Communications. It's a strategic communications consultancy, and I focus on AI for communications.
Right.
And I knew I was going to slip that in at some point. But, it's interesting when you ask the question where your head goes.
Right.
I don't really have a speech written out, so maybe I should.
Not for this show. This show is literally one of those like sit back, have a cup of coffee, it goes where it goes. So I mean, don't worry about it.
That's right.
And I love that.
Yeah,
You unpacked a lot though, brother.
I
So
know.
um, let me ask you a couple of things. First, let me just
Hit me.
applaud you, okay? Because you're talking about the gray in your beard and coming from two daughters, brother. Your beard is darker than mine, and
Ah,
I only have one daughter. This
oh,
to me.
man.
So you're ahead of me. I had two boys that were a piece of cake, and
Hmm.
whoa, yeah.
It, yeah, I
So
know. I'm with you. I'm with you.
yeah. So congrats on surviving that.
Thank you.
You clearly liked being in Japan because you were
Yeah.
there so long, and that's awesome. Obviously, getting married and having kids, is certainly a fantastic reason to stay someplace for 16 years.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just not to get too deep into it, but what do you find was, sort of the biggest differences between Japan and the United States? Maybe is there something you prefer there, and is there
Yeah.
something you prefer here? Just
Yeah,
curious.
it's a common question, and it's hard to tell. Like I think people who go for like a short time, they come back with this pro and con list. This compare contrast. Oh, in Japan they
Sure.
they eat with chopsticks, and in America they eat with forks. Whatever. To me, it's a little grayer. But if I was going to boil it down, so Japan is extremely orderly, in very positive ways. The trains are always on time. The place is super clean. If you see a certain thing on the menu, that's what's on the menu. If you can expect safety, you can expect kindness, um, and respect most of the time. And unless you break the rules, and when you break the rules, it's you're not punished in any way, but you can, you know, it's hard uh, to make good social connections and to really kind of be appreciated among your peers if you're like, if you're a rabble rouser, I suppose, in some ways.
Okay.
Um, it's super, like I said, super clean. Technology is amazing. The food is out of this world. I mean, Japanese food,
Wow.
it's not, and not just Japanese food, any food that's in Tokyo, especially, is among the best of that kind of food you'll ever have. You want great Thai food? The best Thai food outside of Thailand is probably in Tokyo. The best Italian food outside of Italy is very likely in Tokyo, and some Italian restaurants in Tokyo might say, no, we're even better than Italy. They're very, very good. Amazing French food, everything. Chinese food there is nothing like you get here. So, from a food standpoint, and I love Japanese food too, just down home Japanese food. So all of that is amazing. I love the language. When you learn a new language and you think in that language, it changes your thinking patterns. Language has a lot to do with the way that you think.
Hmm.
And Japanese is a is a very contextual language. It's not direct. So,
Interesting. Okay.
you tend to think around things and the structure is the opposite. So, the verb is coming at the end and, it gets you, it definitely messes around with the way that you kind of work through things. As and the people are wonderful. Like I said, kind, safe, everything that and once you break through, like there's a there's a concept in Japan called honne and tatemai, and that means honne is like what's inside, and tatemai is what's on the outside. And you know, Japanese are often stereotypically in a stereotype type of a way. They're often characterized as being two-faced in the past, right? But that's because they have what an outside and an inside, and the inside is really reserved for the people you trust and you love, and that are your friends. So the way you behave at work is your tatema, your outside. The way you behave at home or among your friends, or even after work, when one little bit of alcohol passes your lips, you now have the permission to show your real self, right? So um, getting into Japan and having that, being welcomed, I thought, it's an interesting concept and dealing with that. But here's the thing, like the US or being back home in the States, this is home. I grew up here.
Yeah.
My mom's here. I have space, right? So space is the thing. It sounds a little materialistic. I don't have a big house here, but my kind of humble abode in New Jersey is like 8 times the size of even of one of the nicer apartments I would have had in Tokyo. Um, and that's important when you're raising a family. I think the education system here, for all of its flaws, and gosh knows we all have opinions on that, still encourages the students to be more creative and more free thinking than the education system there. So I wanted to make sure my kids were educated, in a place where they were going to be able to sort of set their minds free. I don't know if we actually accomplished that, but at least conceptually, that's what we wanted.
Sure.
And you know, look, it sounds corny, um, or if you're not, or if you're a civics minded person and you really are a student of, of the Constitution and of the Federalist Papers and everything that has built the U.S., even if it's just ideal, uh, even if it's not what we see every day in practice, fact of the matter is, you got great rights here in the U.S. Like your human rights and your basic rights as a person are unmatched anywhere in the world. So even though in Japan I could be um, like having the greatest time of my life, and I would never have any trouble, or I would never be in a position where I had to kind of rely on my rights. I always knew in the back of my head that as a visiting foreigner, even as a non-citizen, um, I could be summarily arrested and put in jail anytime. Never happens, by the way, but you know, it's it could be. I would
Yeah.
have no recourse, right? They don't have habeas corpus, or there's no such thing as free speech in Japan. Not that I have anything to kind of, you know, blather on about, but um, it just sort of weighs on you a little bit, or it weighs on me after a time. And I know that we have division in here in the U.S., and I know we have varying opinions, and sometimes it feels like politics is religion. But we should always be cognizant and grateful that we do have codified freedom of expression and freedom of freedom of religion, freedom of speech that that you don't get anywhere else. So, you know, I really people say, "Oh, really, Dan? Is that what you experienced?" No, I didn't experience that. Really, I didn't experience any problems in that respect. But when you start to, get on in your years, you're thinking, hmm, what if,
Right.
so, there's a lot of that going on. But um, the U.S. is also wildly unpredictable sometimes, and I like that that part of being here, where you know stuff is not running on the clock. Yeah, the train's late sometimes, and it's a pain in the neck, but it's a little spice of life that you don't always get in Japan.
Nice.
So I don't know if I answered the question thoroughly enough or too thoroughly, but
I love it. Don't worry about it. There's no right or wrong here, man. It's all
yeah,
good. I am curious because I've
yeah,
heard it seems like everybody I've ever heard has gone to Australia has been just
yeah,
gushing about it.
yeah,
Now, and you said the same thing about your family, but you didn't
yeah,
like working there. Is there something
yeah.
about the working environment that just sort of really turned you off?
Well, there's a couple of layers happening at the same time, and since hey, we're it's this is a you said it's a let's get a little personal, so I will. Um, so I left Japan um at a time when I certainly loved Japan, but I was ready. I'm like, okay, ready to go. Been here for 16 years, time to move on. And I jumped into this place that I'd never really been. I'd been there on a for a couple days once, but I never really lived there. But what I didn't realize is I left Japan in April-ish and landed in Australia. What what I neglected to think about, and who would really, but what I neglect to think about is Australia is the southern hemisphere. The seasons are the opposite. So I left sort of at the tail end of winter, beginning of spring, and headed straight into high spring and then straight in and into winter. I never got a summer, right? So like I never got that full daylight that turns out we need to have energy and to be have a rosy view of life. So, and I didn't realize it, but I probably had some sort of seasonal affective disorder happening, but didn't really quite understand it. And it gets worse when you're in the middle of a transition. So, okay, so that's happening. Then on top of that, I get thrown into this new, means I was working with the same company, but an entirely different office culture that I was used to. I've been in Japan for so long, right? There's certain, formalities and things you do every day in Japan, and the way that you interact with your workmates. Going to Australia, it was completely like so different that I was feeling a lot of reverse culture shock. So my office in Australia was like mostly Brits, a couple of Aussies, some South Africans, some Kiwis. It was a mishmash of English speakers, and almost all of them were 10 years younger than me. I mean, I was only 37 or something at the time, but still, they were all like in their 20s, unmarried, like having a great time. And this was a sales office. They were hardcore partiers. Like Australia, it's a heavy drinking culture, and I'm not. Look, I'm fine going out with my workmates. Japan has a drinking culture too, but Australia my office made everything that I had been doing in Japan like it was amateur hour. These folks in Sydney, I'd go out with 10 guys after work, and I didn't realize that the number of people you go out with is the number of rounds that are going to happen. And each round is a pint, like an imperial pint of beer.
Yeah. Wow.
And so you're on a Tuesday night, you're like your 10th freaking beer down. And hey, once or twice, hey, it's okay. But man, every night, like practically every night for a while. And it destroyed me health. Like I was really a mess. And then there were some office things happening where the job that I was thought I had, it was not the job I actually had. And um, it was wearing on me. And I didn't give myself enough time or permission even to take a breather and, accustomize myself to the culture. Meantime, my wife and kids are like, we're living near the beach. They're on the beach every day, they're having a great time. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and whatever. But I was just, and I was commuting every day, and I had the most beautiful commute in the world. I go down this hill to a ferry landing in a place called Manly, which is north of Sydney. So you get on the ferry, and like near the ferry, there's these little fairy penguins. Like they're the only penguins that live outside the Arctic. So you're seeing these little penguins. I'm like, oh, penguins. You get on the ferry and there's dolphins. Sometimes you're rounding the, going through the harbor, you're seeing whales, sometimes sharks. You're seeing this beautiful, beautiful stuff. And one day I was like looking at the dolphins. Oh, sorry, is this a explicit permitted?
You can go ahead and yeah, it's okay.
It's like, oh, fucking dolphins again, you know? And when I had that moment where I'm like, oh, the fucking dolphins, I knew that something was really wrong with me, you know? So I went to seek counsel. And the counselor I spoke to, the first time I ever went to talk to somebody about my mental health. And he said, mate, I'm not going to try to do the accent. Can't do an Aussie accent. But he said, mate, um, you're in a situation. So you're in this work situation where you are really you can't win. Like the structure of the team that I was in was sort of stacked against me from an organizational dynamic standpoint, not even from a personality standpoint. So so you have that going on. You've had the seasonal disorder. You've got this. You've got so much pressure. Blah blah blah. He says you are depressed, my friend. He said you're depressed. You have depression, and it's going to kill you. You need to do something about it. You keep going along this path, and it's just not going to. You're gonna have a heart attack. Something's going to happen. Um, so I quit my job shortly thereafter. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, I spent a couple of months then with nothing to do as the summer was hitting in Australia, and that was brilliant. That was wonderful. Then I was like, oh, dolphins. you know, I mean, after, 'cause the company was very kind. They understood that it was a mismatch from the beginning. So they helped me out a little bit. I couldn't find another job. It's hard to do that in Australia. You need sponsorship for a visa. So, we hung around for a couple more months and then we ended up coming back to the States. But it was hard to work there. And I think that if it was a different job or different role, it could have been different. I don't know. But I do want to go back at some point, um, because it is some of the most beautiful country you could ever be in. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
And those beaches are outstanding. So
Well, I'm sorry you
that's
didn't
the
get to
Australia
experience the
story.
good part of it. Yeah, that's rough, man.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
back in the States here
Yeah.
in the New Jersey area,
Hmm.
right? Okay.
Hmm.
And back home, you start your own company. You're an entrepreneur. You're like, all right,
Yep.
I'm done working for everybody else.
Yep.
Uh, Tell everybody, real quick, what does your company do now? I mean, what is
Okay.
it you offer?
Yeah.
What's the business?
Sure. Well, I mean, so yeah, when I came back to Jersey, it took about 15 years for me to become an entrepreneur again. But like I said, I worked here for a while. So it's not like I came back and started the company. I had some jobs. But yeah, last year I left my company and started Inquisitive Communications. And like I said before, it was because of this kind of the AI disruption that's happening. I've always been at the leading edge of that within the communications profession. So I leaned into it. So I started the company, uh, starting off as, okay, I'm just going to start doing, offering strategic consulting for communications, which means basically such a very broad thing about, doing corporate communications and, you know, I guess, you know, comm strategy, brand strategy, think about executive positioning, executive narrative, corporate narrative, storytelling, all of that stuff. Like wrap that up in a bucket. But really, that was to keep the lights on. And my main focus is in two areas. First is AI related training and development. So doing workshops, doing training for companies and for people who are either at the, hey, what the heck is this AI stuff? Because believe it or not, there's still plenty of people who are like that, all the way up to, um, you know, figuring out use cases and complex workflows with AI tools to achieve the deliverables that you need to achieve for your team or for yourself. So that's the development and training, and the biggest area that I'm super excited about, and that actually came out of is related to my podcast in some way, is something I call the content engine. Not a really an original name. I'll have to think that through again. But um, with AI and with my understanding of how you can position yourself as a thought leader and how you and personal brand,
Mhm.
the biggest kind of I suppose the biggest lift for you, the biggest work, the largest chunk of work that you need to do as a content creator or as to build your personal brand is content. And you know, AI generated content generally sucks. But what if you had a an expert who really understood not the AI part, who understood what it takes to have great content, what it means to have a thought leadership platform, an executive position, your point of view, how you can identify audiences. So that's me. So I've put together a bunch of different workflows really that uses a combination of my own knowledge and AI tools to generate content on behalf of executives, leaders, and business owners, content creators, even for brands. And the beauty of it is that it's all based on your existing body of knowledge and body of work. So, you know, if you have a if you've had a podcast, if you've had a blog, if you've had a YouTube channel, you have like you have a shit ton of content basically that you're sitting on.
Mhm.
And the advantage that you have and the reason you're going to keep your job or the reason you're going to succeed in the future is because that knowledge is not replicable, especially the way that you've laid it out. But you're having trouble accessing it probably. Like you're not thinking all the time, okay, I'm going to go back to the blog post 7 years ago to figure out what I'm going to say. Well, what AI gives you and what I do with it is put all of your stuff into like a primordial soup of knowledge and information that is yours. So when you go and try to create new stuff, you use what you already have to generate to reimagine your old content, create a new point of view in
Mhm.
your words, in your voice, and it's all your thinking. So it's not created out of whole cloth. It doesn't put you out there as an expert in something you're not an expert in. Um, and It's working like a charm. I'm telling you, people love it. But that's what I'm focused on now. Yeah.
Wow.
I hope that makes
So,
sense.
yeah, it's artificially your own intelligence.
Exactly. It's like
Wow.
look, people say I hear this all the time, especially among like let's just say folks of an age of like Gen Xers like us, right? You could just like
I'm
it's
like, you're
like
talking about us, right?
yeah. It's like,
Okay.
oh man, I got to deal with this AI stuff now. I've been through the internet, I've been through social media. Now I got to deal with this. I'm tired of it. And you think that the youngins are going to come and just operate this AI and put us out of business. But the youngins don't have the content that you have. And then you're like, then I've heard from a number of people, well, they're just stealing it and adding it to the AI. I said, well, then steal it for yourself. Steal your own content, use it for yourself, create a second brain, and like essentially nobody's going to be able to replicate what you do, right? And I'm just the catalyst. I'm the facilitator to make that happen.
I mean, you
So,
actually just said out loud, make a second brain.
mhm, yeah,
That's that's the
the
stuff
second
that
brain.
that the Gen Xers like me are, yeah, deathly afraid of.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's
But we
that
need
sort of
that.
thing. But no, I mean, I get the benefits. So you really are. I mean, your company focuses a lot on AI. It's a
Yeah,
main focus on what you do. Okay,
that's
that's
right.
that's
Yeah.
fantastic. If you don't mind, real quick, tell me about the book too, because I'm curious about what the
Oh
most
yeah.
amazing marketing book ever might have in it. And I know you don't want to give away the secret sauce, let
No,
people
I
buy the
can tell
book,
you,
but
I'm happy to give you all
you
the
know,
secret sauces because the book's a couple years old now. And if anybody buys it, thank you very much. It's well past the shelf date.
gotcha.
That's But the content is still quite relevant. The most amazing marketing book ever was a grand experiment. And I belong to this great community called the Rise community with Mark Schaefer. I don't know if you know who Mark Schaefer is. He's a legendary marketing author, futurist. He just wrote his, I think, 11th book called Audacious, but which, by the way, is incredible. Everybody needs to read it. Um, and anyway, I've been friends with Mark for a while, and uh, always trying to stay ahead of the trends, always trying to stay ahead of, where marketing and communications is going. So community was a big idea. We started the Rise community a couple of years ago. Um, and one of the first things that we did in the Rise community, we had, I think it's up to a couple hundred people now, but at that time there's, maybe a couple dozen. And one day I said to Mark, I said, Mark, if you really want to put this community thing to the test, why don't we be the first community written book? He said, oh, that's a great idea. So he sort of made it happen. I incepted it. So I got the dubious job of being one of the co-editors. So we put 33 authors. So we got 33 people to volunteer to be authors of this book. I wrote one chapter, which is on strategic communications. And it's, each chapter is like the same format. It's 10 things that you need to do. And it was published in June of 23. And we were accused of using AI to do it because it's so kind of, a lot of it's very uniform. But we wrote it all before AI. And it's all written by, it's all 100% human. There's, I think, like I said, 36 chapters, 33 authors, and each chapter covers a different part of marketing and communications. So there's a chapter on advertising, there's a chapter on print, there's a chapter on, and it's a great reference book. I think it's fantastic. And I was honored to be there were three editors. And I was honored to be one of the three editors and the guy behind the idea.
Interesting. So did everybody just donate their ideas to this thing, or are you splitting every dollar 33 ways?
Yeah, we do split any revenue that comes from it. But remember, it's a business book. They don't make a lot of money.
Yeah, right.
And we didn't do it for the money, but it is good to have, to be an author, for sure. And it was a great experience. I mean, I certainly learned quite a bit. I think I have like a stack of them. Well, it's behind there, but I do have it around here somewhere. The
That's
most amazing
excellent.
marketing book, but it's a great book. Yeah.
And on
And
top of all this,
the
no, go
audio
ahead.
book, it's just one last plug for that book.
Yeah,
The
sure.
other thing is that the audio book was another first. I think it was the first audiobook ever on Amazon and Audible that where every author did their own chapter. So there's like
Oh, wow.
30 voices. Boy, that was hard to do. I'll tell
I'll
you that
bet.
was hard to do. But
I'll bet.
it's really fun. Yeah,
That
highly
is excellent.
recommended.
Top of all this stuff, you're also a podcaster, which is, why you're here. So
That's right. Yeah,
tell everybody
hard to
about
believe.
the Trending Communicator podcast. Now, what do you use the podcast
Yeah.
for? What's the purpose of it? And kind of what
Mhm.
do you feature,
Yeah.
on it?
So um, this also kind of ties a little bit to Mark Schaefer in that I have been, like I said, at the forefront of communications and technology and just kind of building my career. And Mark wrote this book a while back called Known, Known. And his thesis is essentially that your personal brand is the only thing that you have uh, to kind of insulate you from the vagaries of a career or anything like that. Like if you have a personal brand, that's your only sort of anchor to safety into the future. But it wasn't written in that kind of a panicky type way, but that's sort of the subtext. And the idea is, to establish a personal brand that is at the kind of intersection or that has your sustainable interest where what you like to do and what you want to do intersects with a real need in the world, right? And it's hard to find that. But once you figure out what that is or what you think it should be, then no one gives a really good kind of blueprint or framework for how to kind of start to build that. And it takes a couple of years. Like it's not like, okay, I have a personal brand, it's done. So, like I said, I had the Dan Nestle Show podcast, and that was a lark. That was like, okay, I just want to have a creative avenue, and I like to talk to people, so I'm going to start podcasting. And I it took me a little while to get my feet, but I like the style that you're doing here, Rory, is like conversational, open-ended kind of, I poke and prod a bit, but they're like hour-long conversations, and it was
Sure.
always a lot of fun. But once I started to figure out, I really need a personal brand, um, I decided to double down on communications, which is inclusive of PR and to some extent marketing, because that's where I've been working, and certainly I have a massive network in that area, and I knew I could get great guests. So I just shifted the podcast, rebranded, and now it's a biweekly show, um, hour long, hour can go it can go up to an hour and a half, but uh, I generally talk about some topic within the communications world, but like from the guest, whatever the guest is there for. Like I've had people on. I've had a neuroscientist who specializes in communications, all the way up to the CEO of one of the biggest PR agencies in the world. So, you know, variety of guests all talking about what they're seeing in their world of communications, what they're concerned, like what's keeping them up at night for the future. What do communicators and marketers need to know? And A lot of times we just bullshit about AI. Basically, is what it comes down to. Like I'm underselling, but we talk a lot about AI. We talk a lot about leadership, um, the challenges of leadership, and the future of work in our industry. And it's really refreshing to hear these different perspectives. And for some reason, they like to talk to me. So
That's
I'll take
awesome.
it. I enjoy it.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. So is it
it's a lot of fun.
still, recreational and creative, educational maybe, or I mean, is part of it to, a
Yeah.
sales tool or a marketing tool for your company? How do you use the
You
podcast?
know, it's, I never, it's funny you said that because I'm getting more and more, people who are saying you should be like using it as a lead magnet and, you know, growing your business that way. And slowly but surely, like I have, some of the guests I've had have become, um, important to my business, have become clients or great referrers. And now, like, I don't use the show directly to promote myself. The show is for the guest, right? And me talking is enough of a promotion for myself. People know what they're like. I'm fairly real and raw on the show too. Um, but but I will have conversations with the guest after the mics are off and everything about like, hey, like how can we help each other? And that way I'm having more direct conversations now. It's been very, very fruitful. But when I started the show, I never really thought about using it as a business tool. But now that I am more and more, um, there's a couple things I need to do. The first is I have to start doing video. I mean,
Yeah, you talked about that
what's
earlier.
wrong with
Yeah.
me, right? Yeah. That's the next iteration of the show. Or the next phase is fine. I'll do the video. Crying out loud, stop bothering me. But
Why do you not want to
um,
do video now?
you
What's
need
your
to
feeling about
have
that now?
no. I'm fine with it now. I'm just sort of being tongue in cheek. But I've always felt like when I first started doing the show, I got a lot of resistance from people who are like, I don't want to do video because it was podcast, and it's like I guess it was because it was during the pandemic and people are walking around in their jammies and like, oh, I don't want to get all dressed up and worry. Who the hell, who knows? But there was resistance. So
Okay.
I kind of left it that way. And I got so comfortable having these conversations with people with no pressure of the camera, right?
Yeah.
That, that sort of the idea that the camera adds pressure, um, I think is 99.9% just in my head because I don't think people really care about that anymore. They might have at one point. But nowadays, I mean, certainly over the last year or two, I mean, it's almost a given that okay, so we're recording this video and nobody ever has a problem with it. So that was the thing. That was one of the first things that held me back from doing video. The second thing is just the work behind it because like it's hard enough to run a business and do your own thing and then like deal with the production around your show. And it doesn't take that much now because I've got a rhythm and I have a great tool set that I use,
Sure.
and I have some editors that help me a little bit. But you get your flow. If I add video to that flow, it's going to be it'll be a little bit of work at first. I know
Right.
I'll get used to it, but it's been daunting. Oh shoot, now I got to edit video. Oh, but I have Descript, so I think it'll work out okay. You
Any
know,
change, I understand, man. It's like a
yeah,
upsetting the apple cart. Now it's now
hmm
what do I
that's right,
do?
that's right. But I'm excited. I'm psyched about it because it's time for me to really practice what I preach. And I talk about this on the show too. Is that I always I was a content marketer at heart, like from the beginning, from the early 2000s. Um, Establishing yourself as a thought leader um, through a personal brand and establishing a personal brand through a unique point of view and compelling content. And now it has to be, I think, a little bit even more than compelling. It just has to be excellent. Um, but you got to go where your audiences are. Um, and you can't reach all of your audiences through their ears. Many of
Sure.
your audiences will want to read something. Many of them will want to watch something. Many of them just have time for 30 seconds on Instagram. And if I don't cover those bases, then I'm doing myself a disservice. I'm doing my listeners a disservice, I think. So, and my guests. So, time to do it, you know.
Nice. Nice. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing the
Thank you, man.
shift for you. It's
Hmm.
yeah, it's funny because I have definitely had a few people who have not had issues with the video, but I
Hmm.
was interviewing a couple ladies, and the older lady of the two said, "Wait a minute, this is video? Well, hold on." And she had to go, I got to put on makeup and do my hair real
Go.
quick and put on a different outfit. And
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, I'll wait,
Yeah.
do what you got to do. So people do
True.
react differently. Yeah. But I've only ever had one person who
Hmm.
said, no, I don't want the video shown. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
no problem. I won't load that. That's okay. You'll be an
Yeah.
audio only episode. We'll be
Yeah.
fun.
That's exactly the way I think to
Um,
move forward is just, it is what it is,
right.
you know? Um, the other thing I've done with the podcast or I'm doing now to boost my business, right? So I've visually aligned it with my business. So like, you'll see, at least from a visual standpoint, the logos, the sort of fonts, the text, the style, everything
Mm,
is all the same across my podcast and my business. And soon when I launch a blog and on my Substack, it's all unified in a visual way. So that's one thing. Um, the second part of it is that the content from the podcast is powering everything else. And this is how I this is exactly how I discovered, in a way, the executive content engine I was talking about before, because uh, Notebook LM became available. I don't know if you use Notebook LM, great tool, but it's an incredible research tool, and it allows you. It's a Google product, and it allows you to essentially upload, hundreds of sources. Each source can be very large, up to, basically, let's think about it. Each one could be like the size of a book, essentially, right? So, you know, when you add it all up, if you can drop in 300 sources that are like huge in terms of data, like data is not an issue. Well, hang on a second. Now I can take all of my podcast episodes and I can drop them into essentially one notebook, and which is an AI database of sorts. And then that the combined content within all of my podcasts, all of the transcripts and the show notes are now the body of knowledge for this AI tool. So I can go into the tool and I can say, hey, what do guests of the Trending Communicator say about the future of AI or the future of communications, especially with AI? And it will generate, an answer for me. Well, here's the top 5 themes from, and I said, wait a second. So this is amazing. So I've gotten better at using that tool, and now I can ask very specific questions from different episodes. I can talk to my podcast, and that gave me so much more content, or like, well, it eliminated the excuses from using what I get from my show to create it, from repurposing, from using
mm.
my show to do blogs or do newsletter, right? Um, Now I can very easily create any piece of content starting from a podcast episode or from 5 podcast episodes or from 50 podcast episodes. And it's really opened up doors for me. So then I started working on, started doing that. And I said, wait a second, I could do this for other people, you know? And that evolved into where where I hope my business is going moving forward.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm glad you're doing your own thing. Of course, I just always want to applaud entrepreneurs of any kind, but
Oh,
I mean, you're kind of on the cutting edge of our business here, and so we're
trying
going
to
to be
be.
hearing your name up in lights, like doing great things for the podcasting, nation of the world out there.
Well, I sure hope
It's going
so.
to be awesome.
I spoke at Podfest a few weeks ago. Is Podfest Masterclass in AI. I think like 2 day, 3 day conference that they did, virtual conference.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was asked to speak. I did a presentation about um, my workflow is a practical, like here's my workflow and here's how you repurpose your content to reach audiences everywhere, um, which is right up my alley. So yeah, I do want to do more of that. And whatever I can give back to the podcasting segment, as it were, as a
Segment.
segment or
I
tribe
love
or
it.
community. Yeah, I think podcasters have so much to offer. And like, honestly, when you think about it, and I realize that I'm talking too much, but when you think about it,
You're fine.
written content, yeah, written content is like AI is doing a lot of that. We can talk about how certain you can have even you can have voice content done by AI. You can have like video, other things. Yeah, AI can do your voice, but an organic conversation between two people, two professionals, is totally and wholly original and human. I mean, the power in that, if you think about it, especially moving forward into an increasingly AI dominated content ecosystem.
Yeah.
Like what we're doing here, Rory, is just like this is creation. This is like AI is not going to do this for us. So where do we go with that? That is like I think that's an incredibly powerful I don't say weapon, but maybe it is, right? It's something that we can wield in our own personal brands and our own professional future. So I'm very bullish about it. And I think podcasters, I would love to help podcasters get that under control.
Great. I love the way you just phrased all that too.
Yeah.
There are certain aspects of
Thanks.
of us that I don't think they're going to be able to replace, but I guess time will tell. You know what I mean? We'll just see how it goes.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. Yeah.
but I love
I
that. I
mean,
love that.
yes, it's gonna be interesting times, that's for sure.
Yeah, we are kind of known
Yep.
as the most personal medium right now. In terms of
We are.
yeah. So I like
It's
that.
not about being in the ear, the parasocial relationship we establish with people. It's pretty crazy.
Hmm, like it. Well,
Mhm.
I love this that what you're doing. This is fantastic. Can't wait to see where you take it.
Thank you.
Um, I have a kind of a corny question that I usually ask. It's kind of like my Arnold Schwarzenegger "I'll be back" thing.
All
You
right.
just got to get it in. With what you're doing,
All right.
in particular with the podcasting, but I mean with what you're doing with your business too. We can just go ahead and ask a blanket question. With what you're doing, what is it about what you are doing today and the tools you're using and stuff that you love the most? And what is it about all that you just really and truly can't stand, love to throw it out the window, wish you didn't have to deal with it anymore?
Oh, it's not a corny question, Rory. That's a great question. And like, I thought you were going to ask me like, something about, some dad joke or something, which I'm terrible at, but, what do I like? So I absolutely love the freedom of podcasting. Like
Mm,
the, the fact that you turn on the mic, you get somebody across from you or virtually across from you, and you can go wherever you want to go, right?
yeah,
In a conversation, like with a real person, making a connection. And now I can't get enough of that. That gives me energy. It gives me knowledge. It makes my head spin. Gives me ideas. And it gives me and it in practical terms, it gives me a lot of stuff to work with. Um, so I love that aspect, and I've told people there's the lottery question. What would you do if you win the lottery? That's kind of a corny question, right? But what would you do if you win the lottery? Would be I would like try to make myself a media empire, like just be podcasting all the time. Like it's so much fun. I probably need a few different formats, and I'm not so sure about that, but I like talking and having conversations with people.
Right.
What one thing that I would absolutely just love to get rid of and never do, like just go like, oh, if I never had to do that again, life would be better. Um, oh man, with relation to podcasting, I guess it would be um show notes. You know, I mean,
Really? Okay.
frankly, yeah, I mean, like I don't I do them. I have tools to help me do them now because I have a pattern and I just make it happen, and I'm confident in how I've trained the tools to do it right. And I always get in there in the end, but like it's like, oh man, I got to do the notes again. Jeez. It's like it's one of the things that I'm going to automate at some point, and then I won't worry about it as much. But
Nice.
in the podcasting kind of continuum of stuff to do, that's probably my least favorite is doing the notes. Um, uh, but that, yeah, I don't know. Otherwise, I mean, in other ways, in life, if I could if I could just never ever have to do a tax return again, that would make me the happiest person in the world, right? I'm sure we can all say that. Um,
There you
yeah,
go.
not big on forms and process, and that's problematic for a entrepreneur. But I got to do it.
I
Yeah.
got you. Gotcha. Great answers.
Hmm.
I love them. All right. Listen, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you doing all this and sharing everything that you have. Telling people just about you, personally. I mean, they
I appreciate it.
got to know Dan, Nestle a whole lot better, I think, than they ever knew you before now.
Ooh,
So that's it's kind of
it's
scary,
great.
right? But I love
A little
that,
bit.
and I love what you brought to the show, brother. Before I hit you with my last question, how do people reach you? Best way to contact you if they want to ask you all
Yeah.
about all this stuff you're doing?
Best thing, LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn denizen. So look for me on LinkedIn. You can go to my website, which is Be Inquisitive. That's be-inquisitive.com. And you could just always check out the Trending Communicator. So if you go to the trendingcommunicator.com, that's the podcast website, or trendingcommunicator.substack.com, where my Substack is. And I push those out once a month ish. Like they tend to be longer, and I need to say, do you need to do it more often? But I think, those are the areas you can find me almost anywhere though. I mean, but those are the mains that
Perfect.
I would recommend.
Perfect. All right. I have kept you a
Yeah,
long time, and I appreciate you giving me an hour. Thank you for that. Give me
my
that time.
pleasure.
But last question. Best piece of
Mhm.
advice you have for a podcaster that's out there that's listening today that is not quite where you are.
Personal brand, right? Look into your personal brand. There's a lot of there are a lot of books about this. There's a lot of uh, like advice and websites, etc. But I like the Mark Schaefer take on it with Known, but there's others. But don't give up on your personal brand. Find that sustainable interest where you can uniquely serve some kind of a community and a business, a need with your interest, with your area of interest, and stick to it for 18 months minimum. You got to keep going. You have to be
There you go.
consistent for 18 months and do not give up. That's what I would say. It's because magic does happen around that time, like 18 months to 2 years, you'll see things start to go like, oh, somebody recognized me. Like, I don't know if this ever happens to you, Rory. It probably does because you have that voice, but like I was at a conference recently, and I was talking to somebody, and somebody kind of said, oh, hey, I recognize your voice. Wait, Trending Communicator. And first time that ever happened, uh, maybe the last time, but I was like, oh, this shit works, right?
That's
It's
awesome.
amazing. So keep at it. Yeah, keep at it. Somebody will recognize your voice someday where you don't want it to be recognized. That's the way it works.
Great advice. I love the asides, where you don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
recognized. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
No, I love it. All right. Thank you, man.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, Dan, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing what you have. I appreciate you. Appreciate your time. It's been great getting to know you a little bit here, brother.
Been a pleasure, Rory. I really love it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Folks, that's another episode of the Podcaster Nation. That's why we bring fantastic people on here because this is the place that is about podcasters. It's for podcasters and it's by podcasters. Folks, as we demonstrated again today, this is the place where the rising tide truly raises all ships. So keep sailing.